Throughout history, many books were written, copied, and revered. However, not all of them made it into the Bible we know today. The Bible we read is just one piece of a vast tapestry of writings, some lost to time, others hidden away. But what happened to the books of the Bible that never made it in? Why were they left out of the canon, and what might they have revealed about the ancient world? Join me on a journey into the lost books of the Bible, the forgotten, the mysterious, and the excluded. Together we'll explore what these lost scriptures might have meant and how their absence changed the history of faith. One of the most famous books lost to history is the Book of Enoch. This ancient text, attributed to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah, offers an elaborate narrative about angels, demons, and the fate of the wicked. Enoch's journey into the heavens, guided by angels, provides vivid descriptions of the celestial realm, the fall of the rebellious angels, and their punishment. Despite its prominence in the early centuries of Christianity, the Book of Enoch was excluded from the canonical Bible. Many early Christians considered it a valuable source of spiritual insight, and even some church fathers, like Tertullian and Origen, cited it. However, by the 4th century, its influence waned, and the book was largely forgotten in the West. Rediscovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, Enoch once again garnered attention. But why did the church reject it? Some scholars argue that its descriptions of angels and the supernatural were too fantastical, pushing it out of favor in the final canon. Others believe that its portrayal of judgment and the end times did not fit with the emerging doctrines of the church. While the Book of Enoch gives us an intriguing glimpse into ancient cosmology and divine judgment, it is not the only lost book with a different perspective. Similarly, the Gospel of Thomas challenges our understanding of early Christian teachings, revealing yet another layer of complexity in the early faith. Another lost book is the Gospel of Thomas. Unlike the 4 canonical Gospels, this text is a collection of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, without any narrative framework. Scholars believe it may have been written in the 2nd century and is part of a tradition that emphasizes secret knowledge and direct spiritual experience. Many of its sayings resonate with the canonical Gospels, but some diverge sharply. For example, one passage reads, "Whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death." This focus on gnosis, or hidden wisdom, was a key element of Gnostic Christianity, a movement the early church deemed heretical. The Gospel of Thomas was excluded, likely because it challenged the traditional Christian narrative of salvation through faith and the resurrection. In addition, its message, centered on self-acknowledge and inner enlightenment, seemed too close to Gnostic teachings. As a result, it was lost to the majority of Christians until the 20th century, when it was discovered in the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt. Just as the Gospel of Thomas presented a different view of salvation and spiritual knowledge, similarly, the Apocalypse of Peter offered a strikingly vivid depiction of the afterlife. This is yet another text that was excluded from the Bible for its intense imagery and controversial content. Next, we encounter the Apocalypse of Peter, a vivid description of the afterlife and the punishment of the damned. This work was highly popular in the early Christian world, especially among those seeking vivid, apocalyptic visions of the afterlife. It includes horrific depictions of sinners being tortured in hell, offering a stark vision of divine justice. Despite its early popularity, the Apocalypse of Peter was eventually excluded from the Bible. Why? The Church may have found its graphic depictions of hell too unsettling and divisive. As the idea of hell evolved in Christian theology, the imagery of eternal torment began to clash with the more abstract concepts of divine judgment. Interestingly, some of its contents influenced later Christian art, especially depictions of hell, but the text itself never made it into the final canon. In its place, the more restrained visions of the afterlife from the canonical texts prevailed. Now, while the Apocalypse of Peter might have focused on a harsh vision of hell, there's yet another text that shifts our perception in a completely different direction. In contrast, the Gospel of Judas portrays a unique relationship between Jesus and his disciples, turning traditional narratives upside down. The Gospel of Judas, discovered in the 1970s in Egypt, is perhaps one of the most controversial lost texts. This gospel presents Judas Iscariot not as the villain, but as the favored disciple of Jesus. In this text, Judas is portrayed as carrying out Jesus' wishes by betraying him to the authorities. The Gospel of Judas challenges the traditional narrative in which Judas is the arch-traitor. It suggests a much more complex and enigmatic relationship between Jesus and his disciples. This subversion of the established narrative made it highly controversial and led to its exclusion from the New Testament. The Gospel of Judas was likely seen as a challenge to the Orthodox understanding of Jesus' life and mission. Furthermore, the portrayal of Judas as an instrument of God's will conflicted with the theology that dominated early Christianity, leading to the text's suppression. As we've seen, many of these lost books present perspectives that were too radical for the early church. Similarly, there were other letters written by Paul that never made it into the New Testament, and these letters may have added a new layer of understanding to the early Christian movement. Beyond the well-known letters of Paul, there were other letters that never made it into the New Testament. These letters, some of which were referred to by early Christian writers, have been lost to time. The Epistle to the Laodiceans, for example, is mentioned by Paul in his letter to the Colossians, but has not survived. A plan laid down by Paul for the leash himself to use in the leash servants, since while these letters may have been excluded for their theological content, or simply lost in the ravages of time, their absence leaves us with a glimpse into a broader, more diverse early Christian community. Who knows what hidden wisdom they might have contained? The lost books of the Bible are not just curiosities. They are windows into a world of ideas, beliefs, and struggles that shaped the early Christian faith. Each book lost to history reveals something about the struggles of the early church, its leaders, and the diverse interpretations of Jesus' message. Although we may never fully recover all that was lost, their stories continue to intrigue and challenge us, inviting us to ask questions about the faith, the Bible, and the path of history. The question remains, what if the Bible we know today is only a small part of the story? Perhaps, in the pages of those lost books, we might find answers to questions we never thought to ask. Tang King, Dang, Xing Gui, Gong Gang. Join us next time as we delve into more bewildering, thought-provoking mysteries.